All right. So I'm going to, my name is Kayla Breelove Counselling. I'll be your presenter today for the self-compassion webinar. I am going to remove my video so everybody can focus on the slide instead of my beautiful face. But at the end, I ask for all of you to stay put, send me a message if there are questions, but we will have an opportunity for questions at the end of the webinar today. So welcome to our self-compassion webinar. As I mentioned before, my name is Kayla Breelove Counselling. I'm a licensed counseling therapist as well as a clinical traumatologist and a clinical supervisor for the community counseling program in Moncton. I'm really looking forward in offering you this webinar today. This workshop was created by Breelove Counselling team with information provided by the Center for Clinical Intervention. As I mentioned previously, for those of you who may just have arrived, there will be a survey at the end of this webinar. So we welcome you to stay put until the end to complete this survey. This survey is really going to help us to refine our skills and develop new webinars of interest. I'd like to start us off by sharing with you what it is that we do here at Breelove Counselling. Using a trauma-informed approach, we operate an integrative practice focused on community and private partnerships. Our specialty ranges from general mental health, art therapy, adversities, trauma, to nutritional psychology for individuals age 18 and older. Our focus is to help individuals build resilience and heal. We achieve this by exploring opportunities for wellness and empowerment, non-judgmental listening, and customized treatment plans. Breelove Counselling contributes to the efforts of a resilient community. Since 2012, we've focused on services that support and empower wellness, awareness, and resilience. This focus is also a central part of our practicum placement program, the community counseling program, which is in partnership with the Canadian Mental Health Association of New Brunswick, the Moncton office. This program offers free counseling therapy for those in need, including our counseling clinic, to which we've made available virtually during this pandemic. I'd like to bring you through 5 main topics today. So these topics will bring awareness to the importance of self-compassion, especially through tough times. To keep with the flow of our webinar, I do encourage you to ask questions by message only. At the end, I'll be happy to take questions via video and message. I hope this workshop will bring about new skills and improve experiences for all of you. So let's begin with exploring self-compassion itself. The old saying goes that you are your own worst critic. It's true that most of us are hard on ourselves, particularly if we get even the slightest hint that we don't match up in some way. In our achievements, career or study, social standing, relationships, appearance, body image, financial status, etc. If we make even the minutest mistake, then we have a tendency to berate ourselves. And if we make a genuine medium or large mistake, then look out. People seem to find it hard, and for some, almost impossible, to treat or speak to themselves in a kind or caring manner. In fact, some recoil from the idea of it, like they are being asked to do something repulsive or painful. Being able to cultivate self-compassion for some may be a standalone approach that helps address all your mental health needs. For others, it may be a helpful starting point to then go on and address more specific issues. Either way, if you identify with being your own harshest critic, then understanding the journey from self-criticism to self-kindness can benefit you. So what is self-compassion? First, to define self-compassion, start with what is compassion. Compassion is basically an attitude that involves a variety of feelings, thoughts, motives, desires, urges, and behaviors that can be directed towards any being. So ourselves, another person, animals, a society, the environment. When we talk about self-compassion, we are specifically talking about our attitude towards ourselves. Self-compassion itself uses mindfulness, self-kindness, and connectedness to manifest unconditional views towards ourselves, giving us the sense that we are unconditional worth, we have unconditional love, and kindness towards ourselves. Paul Gilbert and Kristen Neff are two leading figures in the area of building self-compassion. As such, their teachings emphasize on 4 key things to consider while practicing self-compassion. Awareness, being attentive or sensitive to the fact that some sort of suffering is occurring. Now, suffering could mean some distressing struggles with emotional pain, mental pain, physical pain, or all of the above. Normalizing, recognizing that experiencing this sort of pain is universal. We all experience pain at some point to varying degrees. The fact that we experience pain isn't a fault or failing of ours. We are not to blame for our pain, and we are not alone in our pain. Kindness, not shying away from or ignoring the pain, but meeting this pain with feelings of kindness, care, warmth, and concern. And finally, alleviation, focusing our energy on ways to alleviate the pain, which may be via providing further comfort and caring actions, providing a helpful perspective regarding whatever the trouble is, or having the strength and courage to take other necessary actions to address the problems we face. Self-compassion is about doing all of these 4 things for ourselves when we're struggling, like being aware of our own pain, whatever that may be. Understanding that while feeling this pain is hard, this is a normal human experience, not a failing on our part, and that we're not alone. It then involves directing feelings of kindness and care towards ourselves, just as we might do to someone else we care about who's struggling as well. And finally, focusing our attention and energy on how we might improve our pain and move through the struggles we're facing. Sounds great, right? I'm sure many of us are thinking, how exactly do I do that? So we'll be exploring that later. Why is self-compassion important? Self-compassion can bring great benefits for our mental health and well-being. Particularly, self-compassion can activate our soothe system, which calms our threat system. So our threat system is the system responsible for detecting potential danger in order to protect ourselves. And our drive system, that system is what spurs us on to getting things done and be active in life, so a motivator. This is important because without soothe systems, our threat and drive system become overactive and can lead to difficult emotions such as anxiety, anger, depression. Therefore, self-compassion plays a vital role in helping to balance our emotions. The need to receive care and nurturing evolved as a strong need within all mammals, including humans. Being cared for from birth is vital to our survival, and without it, we struggle to thrive. Some of us have unfortunately experienced what we call adverse childhood experiences. As a result of these adversities, our stress response and our threat system are overactive. Some of us all the time, others for the smallest circumstances. Alternatively, the success of the human race as a species has depended on us receiving care and being motivated to give care to other beings. In reflection with the pandemic that we're all facing, now is a time where self-compassion can benefit us the most. Well, when self-compassion is working well, we work together, we support each other, we flourish, and we have resilience. Research has shown that self-compassion is strongly linked to our mental health and well-being. A major part of the work I do within my role as a traumatologist is helping individuals explore their benefits of self-compassion. This plays a key role in the recovery and increased vicarious resilience in some of the most challenged and complex cases that I see. This reflects even in studies where they found that those who are more compassionate towards themselves tend to have less mental health problems like depression, anxiety, and stress. I mentioned earlier that studies and research provide a clear between self-compassion and good mental health. In more specific terms, individuals practicing self-compassion are happier, less stressed, and have more vicarious resilience. In reality, however, I think we can be honest with ourselves in acknowledging that our mental health is being tested at the moment. Many of us are struggling to stay happy, are extremely stressed, and are fighting to maintain resiliency. As humans, we have decades of adversities that have resulted in our species to adapt and thrive resiliently. It takes significant vulnerability, courage, and a will to survive to get as far as we have collectively. But most importantly, it has taken a magnitude of compassion. It's okay to admit that things are not okay. As you practice self-compassion, you give yourself permission to continue learning and understanding the benefits of this way of being towards yourself. When we struggle with self-compassion, we are suffering internally. Sufferance can create instances of intolerance to situations that threat our worth, things like unhelpful thoughts about ourselves, perceived failures, risky behaviors, beliefs created by adverse experiences and violence. When we give ourselves permission to be kind towards ourselves, we literally give our body a release of oxytocin. This hormone, which is also shown to release when parent and child bond, or even human and dog companion, this hormone promotes bonding and closeness, and particularly active when we find ourselves being nurtured. So for those of you who may have experienced childhood adversities, perhaps rejection, abandonment, or violence, when you practice self-compassion, you invoke nurturing for yourself. This can help heal past injuries from those adverse experiences. When I said that self-compassion helps balance out emotions, it was meant in the literal sense that it releases oxytocin, which calms individuals. On the outside, this may be seen as making healthy choices for your well-being, including self-care, setting boundaries, intentionally following your values, eating mindfully, and having healthy relationships. It's also important to recognize that sometimes, such as our very real and very current situation, it may become hard to practice self-compassion, as I've described. Understanding how your threat system is overactive can help you practice self-compassion when you recognize whether the threat is perceived or real. So as an example, our threat systems activate enough to help us respond to the pandemic by individually taking precautions such as practicing social distancing, washing our hands thoroughly, and staying informed through trusted sources, such as the Center of Disease and Control, the World Health Organization, or local trusted media. Self-compassion can help us buffer the system working overtime. Misinterpretations or perceived beliefs can ignite the threat system. Your own drive system is another system that is worth understanding. We know that our soothe system helps reduce the unhelpful outcome of an overactive threat or drive. But some of us might wonder, isn't the drive system helpful for us? Since it motivates us to get things done, be active in life? Absolutely. At the same time, however, things like societal views, perceptions, and distorted beliefs are also risk working this system over time and can become exhausted by the need to achieve and the fear of failure. Recognizing your tolerance of your drive system can help bring good mental health and well-being. Feeling bad about ourselves for whatever reason should be a flag that one of these systems is creeping up to becoming overactive. Knowing when your soothe system is activated is just as helpful. This helps build a foundation to which you recognize the various thoughts, feelings, and behaviors associated to being in the soothe system. An example of experiencing your activated soothe system Could be when you are relaxing, feeling safe and calm, feeling content, and or feeling nurtured. Your threat system and soothe system cannot be activated at once. Your drive system and soothe system cannot be activated at once either. This isn't an opportunity during our social distancing practice, and for most of us that are staying home, we can practice our soothe techniques to calm our threat and drive system by being self-compassionate. So why is it so hard to be compassionate with ourselves? Being self-compassionate is hard for most of us for various reasons. Like we mentioned before, the threat system. Our brain is hardwired to shift into threat mode easily to protect ourselves. Seeing the negative is our default attention bias. So turning our attention to more self-compassionate endeavors might not be something that comes naturally to us. Early life experiences. We may have not been taught or even shown how to be compassionate towards ourselves. Although we are able to be compassionate, if we're not taught, given, or shown compassion, we risk being unaware of our rights to compassion and kindness. Lack of awareness. When we're unaware that we are struggling or unaware of our unhelpful beliefs and behaviors towards ourselves, we manifest deep-seated beliefs that have us going through life almost on autopilot, doing what we have always done and have never taken the time to assess how we talk to ourselves. It may never have even occurred to us that we may not have been treating ourselves kindly and that we have the option to do so. And there's also negative beliefs about self-compassion. So when we are taught differently, or when the benefits of self-compassion aren't talked about a lot, we may create negative beliefs about self-compassion. After all, we are humans. We like predictability and certainty. If we can be certain that there is no benefits to self-compassion, then your choices can become more predictable. And when predictable, as mentioned earlier, it can create autopilot beliefs. Some of these beliefs can have us thinking that maybe being self-compassionate is too touchy-feely or laziness or self-pity or even greedy. The reality is that self-compassion isn't any of these things. Self-compassion is honoring your authentic self, giving yourself permission to experience good mental health, wellness, and truly being human. Building self-compassion is not a quick fix. It is a work in progress, as there are a variety of things that can influence our compassion. This slide provides us with a visual of self-criticism cycle, and often the reasons why we stay stuck in the cycle of criticism. So let's have a look. So the triggers. These are situations, thoughts, emotions, or physical sensations that may occur. As a result, then our threat system becomes activated. During this system, 3 responses are invoked. Emotional, so it could be anger, anxiety, or depression. Behavioral, such as fight, flight, or freeze. And physical, such as perhaps arousal, tension, heart rate increases, de-arousal, feeling tired or low energy. Then comes the self-criticism, criticizing ourselves for the trigger and or our response to the trigger. So this begins really to be reinforced by our lack of awareness, our positive beliefs about self-criticism, and our negative beliefs about self-compassion, which leads to consequences. So the consequences are basically that the threat system remains active and the responses continue, and then we're stuck in this vicious cycle. So why do we become victims of this cycle? Self-criticism is reinforced by a lack of awareness, positive beliefs about self-criticism, and negative beliefs about self-compassion. These aspects perpetuate the cycle of criticism in their own respect and collectively. Lack of awareness is our own struggle and our self-critical way of dealing with things. By holding a positive belief about self-criticism, as being a helpful thing to do, as well as holding negative beliefs about self-compassion that can make us reluctant to take a compassionate tone to ourselves. In other words, when we're not aware of how we can practice self-compassion in our day-to-day life, we may criticize ourselves in the form of self-improvement or self-punishment. This leads to a negative belief about self-compassion in the sense that it doesn't actually benefit us in the long run, as in there's always room for improvement, or we can always do better, or we should be doing better. I'm such an idiot. I can't believe I did that. I'm so useless. I need to do better. I should be doing better. Other people don't make such stupid mistakes. I'm just not careful enough. I've never been careful enough. And now I'm failing and getting what I deserve. Do these statements sound familiar to you? Close to the things you may think about yourself or flat out tell yourself? I think we can all agree that when we hear it intentionally like this, that this is an unhelpful way of talking to ourselves and definitely does not promote self-compassion. The tricky part is that when we do think these things or say these things to ourselves, we often may not realize that the motivation behind it is from a belief that self-criticism carries some benefits. Our minds aren't stupid, and they don't do things for no good reason. Self-criticism usually occurs to fulfill at least one of two main aims: self-improvement or self-punishment. Self-improvement and this reasoning self-criticism often occurs as an attempt at self-correction. It can be seen as an opportunity to highlight weakness and fixing them. It can be perceived as an encouragement to better ourselves, motivate ourselves, push ourselves to do better, be stronger, stop mistakes, or address flaws. Most probably, your drive system would be activated when your self-criticism is pushing to self-improve your outcomes. Then there's self-punishment. When we experience a sense of low self-worth, we may subconsciously believe and consciously behave as though we are bad people or have done bad things. In this particular reasoning, we often result in punishing ourselves. The most fascinating part is that if there is no one else to dish out the punishment, then we'll dish it out to ourselves. Although common beliefs around self-criticism like, it motivates me, it helps me get things done, it toughens me up, it pushes me to excel, or it makes me a better person, motivates the idea that self-criticism has its benefits. It may create a challenge for you to transition into self-compassion. As mentioned, when we believe that self-criticism is beneficial, it can create a barrier to giving up self-criticism and embrace self-compassion. It makes sense. Why would you give up something that you thought was good? So I think something that can be helpful is, rather than just blindly accept the idea that self-criticism is helpful, check it out further. One way of doing this is by challenging or disputing your beliefs. Check this belief further. Is it a fact or is it an opinion? What is the accuracy of this belief? And is it helpful for me in this moment? Here's a reflective example. If self-criticism really was beneficial, why is it that most people wouldn't use it as a way of dealing with a friend or child who was upset? We tend to be able to talk to children or friends in a compassionate way, but struggle to offer the same kindness to ourselves. So the takeaway here is that self-criticism often leads into distorted beliefs about self-compassion. How many times have you said those statements to yourself? Just get over it. Just think positive. You're overreacting. Calm down. In the last couple of weeks so far. These statements are statements of distorted beliefs. If you think about it, if we give up being self-critical and instead are more self-compassionate, we may fear a negative backlash. Others fear the unknown, like, what if things get worse? What if I fail? What if I can't control it? There are a lot of misconceptions about what self-compassion truly involves. Some, unfortunately, have the impression that self-compassion equals to being weak. Others see it as equating to self-pity and sidestepping, having to take responsibility in life. To address these misconceptions we may have about self-compassion, we need to come back to the definition of what true self-compassion is in the first place. One way of doing this is thinking of people that you consider to be compassionate human beings. Compare these individuals to the distorted beliefs. Are these people lazy, self-indulgent, self-absorbed, undisciplined, lacks control? Probably not. Given what we know on how to develop more self-compassion, here are some ways that our threat system may get in the way of being able to apply these aspects and how we can do the opposite. These are some of the different ways our threat system gets in the way of us being able to accomplish what we want. And instead of giving into these fears, we can decide to do the opposite. So let's have a look. The threat system says, avoid things I need or would like to be doing because it makes me anxious. Instead, if it is a realistic or safe situation, then find ways to gradually face these situations and stay in them until you have ridden through the anxiety. By repeatedly doing this, you will slowly build confidence that the situation is safe and you can cope with anxiety. Let's have a look at the other one. Escape or numb the problems and my feelings by using alcohol or drugs, restricting my food or binge eating, self-harming, etc. Instead, show your self-compassion by thinking compassionately. Maybe by using a compassion thought diary or compassionate letter writing, and taking care of yourself through self-soothing activities, perhaps reducing alcohol and drug use, healthy, mindful, regular eating. Then perhaps your threat system says, isolate myself from everyone and everything so I don't get hurt. Instead, take care of yourself through self-soothing activities and take care of others by connecting with others by doing kind things for them. So how can I develop more self-compassion? In order to be able to respond to ourselves compassionately, we need to be aware that we're struggling in the first place. We need to be aware when our mind leaps into self-critical thinking, which only causes us to manifest our struggles even more. Slowing ourselves down in order to see the whirlwind direction we may be falling into. Without being able to slow down or becoming aware, we can't make choices to try something different, to try a new compassionate approach. The different strategies shown here will likely not work without first slowing down and becoming aware of what is happening within you. Breathing plays an important role when it comes to our physical and emotional state. When we are triggered or that our threat system is overreacting, this can activate our sympathetic system. This system is responsible for revving up our body. That means our breathing rate can get fast and a number of other physiological changes begin. This is to help us fight, flight, or freeze. Practicing breathing techniques slows the mind and body down from threat mode into self-soothe mode. There are several different styles of deep breathing experiences. One that I tend to utilize with my clients in sessions is the 4-7-8 method. So basically, you inhale through your nose for 4 seconds. You hold your breath for 7, and then you exhale with puckered lips for 8 seconds. This gets repeated a few times until you have a calm and clear head. It is also adjustable for individuals' needs and breathing capacity. With some of my clients, I tend to say that it can be helpful to do that method 4 times, and then they start feeling the relief. Other people might be sooner, or others may need to do it a little bit more frequently. So if we take a moment to breathe in 4 seconds, holding it for 7, 6, 7, and then exhaling puckered lips for 8. 8. How we think of a situation contributes to both our self-criticism and self-compassion. In order to train ourselves into developing more self-compassion, we need to train ourselves into catching our thoughts regarding the situation. Have you caught yourself saying, just get over, or calm down this week? 9 times out of 10, we say these statements automatically to ourselves without realizing it. When we start bringing attention to these statements, then we can redirect them into more positive statements to ourselves, like, it's okay not to be calm, or I don't have to get over it right this second. How can focusing on mundane tasks like housework help us to develop more self-compassion? Mundane tasks help us redirect our attention and take notice of what you're doing in the present moment. Do you notice your mind wander? Are you being self-critical with the tasks that you are doing? Activate your 5 senses: touch, sight, sound, smell, and taste. Bring the focus back to paying attention to what you are doing in a non-judgmental way. Meditation. This practice helps train ourselves in becoming more aware of our surroundings and what your attention may get caught up in. This helps redirect your thoughts in a beneficial manner. There are so many different types of meditation practices that you can get for free on YouTube and different other websites. There are from 5 minutes to 15 minutes to half hours to even full hours or sleeping meditations. So it can be helpful to check those out later. Practice, practice, practice. The title says it all. You cannot get better at something if you don't practice. Be gentle towards yourself. It will take time to develop these self-compassionate skills, but it can happen. All you need to do is practice. Participating and practicing these 5 actions can support you in your journey towards living compassionately with yourself. Self-compassionate living is the ability to show yourself kindness, respect, and warmth on a daily basis through the practice of self-compassion. Self-compassion does not simply become a routine. Rather, it's an attitude that you direct towards your lifestyle. I recognize that building self-compassion is not a quick fix, and that this will definitely be a work in progress. You're going to experiment with this compassionate way of talking to and treating yourself. And some days it's going to work really well, and other days it's going to be more difficult. All of this is normal, and it's really natural when we start to make changes to our usual ways of being. While we've explored ways to practice self-compassion, I need to also mention that there is no single behavior that goes with being self-compassionate. It really depends on your circumstances. So to simplify it, let's divide self-compassionate behaviors into 3 categories. So the 3 categories are taking care of yourself, taking care of others, and taking care of business. So when we mean taking care of business, we mean attending to the things that we need to do or have to do. Doing kind things for ourselves, particularly when we're struggling, just as we would try and help a friend in need, can help us to cope and move through difficult emotional experiences. The aim of taking care of ourselves is not to take our emotional pain away or to solve the problem at hand, but to see what happens when we choose to be kind to ourselves by involving ourselves in activities that reflect kindness and self-care. Showing compassion towards other beings is another way to help build our own self-compassion. The more time we spend being compassionate, whether with ourselves or towards others, the more our soothe system is active, and hence, the better it is for our general mental health and well-being. Taking care of others is not the same as just being passive, unassertive, or submissive to other people's demands. It isn't about just doing what others tell you to do. Taking care of others should be motivated from a kindness within us that we want to show others in some way through our kind behavior. It is not about surrendering to others and doing things others tell us to do that we don't really want to be doing. These behaviors can lead to resentment, burnout, and in some cases, compassionate fatigue. When thinking about the different ways we could go about taking care of ourselves, we could think of taking someone close to us for the things they do or for what they do for us, so thanking them. Maybe it means planning a kind act or gesture for someone we care about. Or do something caring to cheer up someone we care about, or compliment someone we care about, or show kindness to strangers. Compassion is not just about the warm and fuzzy kind of stuff. This is important, but not the only thing that comprises compassion. Being compassionate also involves some hard stuff, like courage, vulnerability, and strengths to face our struggles. This is taking care of business. When you face the problem, rather than running away from it, and doing what we can to try and work through it. This certainly does not mean that all problems can be worked through like we plan. And under those situations, taking care of ourselves with self-soothing activities and self-compassionate thinking is particularly important to help us work through difficult times that we can't do much about. With many problems, there may be things we can try, actions we can take. Doing these things may lead us to feel a bit less helpless and a bit less hopeless. This also gives you an opportunity to explore opposite actions. We've explored some opposite actions a few slides ago. I believe it was slide 14. Participating and practicing ways to stimulate the soothe system, we can begin to cultivate an attitude of kindness, warmth, concern, understanding, strength in us, and then use this attitude to respond to our own struggles rather than reverting to our usual self-critical habits. Here's a self-compassionate cycle. This cycle shows the consequence of responding in a new compassionate manner. We talked about this before. The threat and soothe system can't be active at the same time as they are incompatible experiences. When you respond in self-compassionate ways, you get your soothe system started. Through slow breathing and retraining your attention, you can help your soothe system remain active and calm the threat system and all of its emotional, behavioral, and physical responses. You then give yourself the opportunity to make room for feelings of warmth, soothing, safety, and calm. Stepping out of the self-critical cycle and into the self-compassionate cycle will happen pretty easily in some occasions and not so much in others. Keeping this in mind, it can be helpful to participate and practice various forms of self-soothe techniques. Find the one that feels right for you. These kinds of exercises or techniques take daily practice to become successful and to feel their positive benefits. This basically means not only practicing them when your threat and drive system are activated, but on a day-to-day basis in order to create subconsciously new choices when your threat and drive system activate. These methods can even be used all together, from mindful breathing to attention retraining and engaging your senses. Maybe practice gratitude journaling or write yourself a compassionate letter. Gratitude journals are an easy way to foster self-compassion in your day-to-day life. Writing a compassionate letter to yourself can help you create a kinder, more balanced, and helpful perspective on whatever is troubling you in your life. In our particular time, participating and practicing social distancing as a result of the recent global pandemic of COVID-19, we can still practice self-soothing techniques by adapting to ways that help us respect the advisories, while more importantly, helping you practice self-compassion. Enjoy a favorite drink, make a nice meal. If you'd like, be creative if you have kids or find this fun. Set your table up like a restaurant. Step out your front door and enjoy sunshine. Even go for a small walk within your neighborhood. Are you missing hugs from those you were close with? Try hugging yourself. Allow yourself to feel the embrace and truly hone into it. Read a book or magazine, or even take a break. It may seem like all you're doing is taking breaks, but are you taking that moment in intentionally? Have you noticed a pattern with these self-soothe techniques? They are centered around changing your behavior and allowing yourself time to relax. If you have difficulties trying to put these activities to a test, create a weekly activity schedule. Allow yourself specific times to do specific tasks while trying to maintain acceptance and kindness through all of this. Being self-compassionate involves an acceptance of human imperfection. Acknowledge and give yourself permission to honor yourself and to respect that you may not be perfectly compassionate towards yourself or others all the time. Instead, recognize that the more time you spend in compassion mode, the more your mental health and well-being will thank you. Your slow breathing and new perspectives are your key to self-compassion. It's also the same key to activating your soothe system. Self-compassion is helpful in whatever you're going through. Bringing an attitude of self-compassion to anything we do in life can help us experience more general contentment and make any struggles that we may face that bit easier to weather. So it's been a pleasure sharing our team's knowledge and self-compassion. I really do hope that you've learned some new skills, or this has helped ponder for the reflections. I'm going to be taking away the stop sharing mode and bringing up my video again so that I can give you time for any questions that you might have or any comments. If you do have questions in the next few days, you're more than welcome to connect with the Canadian Mental Health Association of New Brunswick, and they'll be able to triage those questions to the appropriate facilitators. So please do connect with us through our website, visit our Instagram, and be sure to continue checking in with CMHA New Brunswick for programs and services. So one person had made a comment, which is, yeah, fantastic, that the emotional intensity continuum is an amazing self-compassion tool. So absolutely. So we have a question here about if I can explain again why breathing actually calms the body. So when we do breathing, number one, you're giving yourself the opportunity to bring oxygen to your brain, which also allows your brain to get out for that moment in that threat system. So when I talked about the threat or drive system, when it becomes really overactive, we basically go into our brain switches into primitive gear. So our most primitive gear is our survival gear. And this has been shown in studies and just evolution itself within human beings. If you think about it this way, when we used to be in caveman times, our threat system was really important for us to be able to survive. So if, let's say, that caveman went by, I don't know, a particular area where there was a saber-toothed tiger, then that would have increase that idea, that threat system. When our threat system gets activated, it's sending the rest of your body into shutdown because it's putting all of its energy into needing to survive, either fight, flight, or freeze. So when the rest of your body is being shut down to either flee a threatening circumstance, then of course your digestive system isn't going to be working that well. Your breathing is probably going to be impacted because you're not going to be utilizing that part of your brain of being able to consciously breathe. It's basically going to breathe the amount that you need in order to not suffocate, right? So, but when those things happen, then it becomes this vicious cycle. because as your breathing gets really shallow or that certain things are not functioning right, it continues to perpetuate that, yes, indeed, I am in danger. And then it just continues in this cycle of I'm in danger right now, whether it is perceived or not. So yes, saber-toothed tigers and stuff like that, that would have been really helpful back then. But now, unfortunately, the threats are different. We're not being threatened by saber-toothed tigers. We're being threatened by social status and what people think about us and the pressures of society and pandemics such as these things, and being social injustices and all these different types of stressors. So even though that our threat system have sort of changed, the way that our body takes that in has not changed. And our brain is not sophisticated enough to be able to process all that information when it's in threat mode, because your brain should not need to be sophisticated in threat mode. It should just have the focus of, I need to survive. So I hope that kind of explains why breathing actually helps, because when we breathe, we're giving that opportunity to have that oxygen flow through the brain and kind of gives that opportunity for your brain to not remove itself from threat, but not be so overactive in the threat system, which allows your consciousness or your reasonable side to be like, okay, how is this helpful for me in that moment? But if we're not aware of those things, then of course it's just going to hijack it completely. So I hope that answers your question about why breathing actually calms the body. The next question, if we have any tools for body image. So this particular individual works a lot with middle school and high school students, and they find that this is a huge issue for many of them. Usually when I work with individuals that do have body image, self-compassion can be a really important tool to build that foundation, because a lot of times the body image comes from this idea that I am not worthy, or that there is something wrong with me. But most of those times is because it's something that's learned. So it's about really exploring, you know, is this a social thing? So does this come from social peers that they're feeling unsafe, and as a result of that, they're doubting their body image? Does it have to do with their parents? A lot of times parents have their own baggage. A lot of parents would say, you know, I didn't necessarily have that much self-esteem, or perhaps parents may, you know, be very specific on these health regimes and exercising and all those things. So, but particularly for body image, I do have tools. So for you, Miranda, or for anyone else, I did put my email in the questions and answers. So you're more than welcome to send me an email, and I can send you more specific resources for that. But in general, the self-compassion work really does help with that body image, because it rebuilds that foundation of what type of relationship do I have with myself? And do I love myself? Do I have a healthy relationship with myself? And once you've worked on those things, then it makes it so much easier to then be able to have healthier relationships externally, such as having healthier boundaries and etc. So hopefully that sort of answers your question, Miranda. If not, by any means, please send me an email and we can discuss that further with some handouts that I can provide for you. So here, would you have any recommendations for guided meditations in self-compassion? It really depends. Like for me, there's a lot of really good guided meditations on YouTube. I'm very particular about the voice of the people though. So to each their own, but I would basically just, most times, literally on YouTube, I will put in guided meditation for self-compassion and then kind of just look at which one may appeal more to me. But guaranteed for me, it is a tone thing. It is the voice of the person. So to allow me to have that sort of being able to soothe. But I know that different types are very good. By any means, you can send me an email and I can send you a list of those that I enjoy, and you can go from there if that can be helpful. So the next questions I have here, so thanks for the webinar, you're very welcome. If you ask clients to write some things that they are grateful for in a journal, do you usually ask them to share with you some things they might have written during following sessions, if they are comfortable doing so? So if I have any suggestions on what type of discussions I have. So that's a really good point. Usually with individuals, there are 3 types of journals. So there is the gratitude journal, where you're really intentionally focusing on good things that are happening. There's also just the journal of being able to identify various patterns. So that means that there's going to be helpful and unhelpful things that are being written. When I do work with clients and they do begin writing within their journal, we do have those conversations. So I would ask them, you know, firstly, what is sort of their takeaway from our last session, and if there's anything that they would like to share. It's really about the therapeutic relationship. Most often, I've been very grateful to have clients that are usually motivated and wanting to share their journals with me. But for those of them that may not, I try to have more of the conversation that when we're having conversations about self-compassion, about particular things, of being able to throw that option in there of kind of reflecting and saying, you know, talking about this particular subject, I'm wondering, has there been patterns in your journal that reflect our conversation that we're having today? And that kind of just opens up the conversation of being able to share that information. But for the most part, having those therapeutic conversations, they end up inadvertently talking about the things that perhaps are also reflected in their journal. So I hope that kind of answers it. And if not, once again, you can email me and we can further that conversation. So I've heard that holding your breath can trigger, absolutely. So techniques with that 7 holding count be triggering for people. So that is a really, really good question. So being a traumatologist, I also recognize that a lot of these soothing techniques can actually be triggering for those that have acute symptoms of anxiety, have childhood adversities, or even traumatic experiences in the past. So part of these grounding techniques is really an opportunity to, one, begin in a safe environment where you can start exploring what type of feelings you're going to have. If you are triggered by those, by any means, I usually ask people to stop doing those grounding techniques until we continue our process of working towards building a stronger self-compassionate foundation. So really understanding where these self-criticisms are coming from, where the self-defeating thoughts are coming from, and starting to make those connections. Once those connections become to be made, that there's more of a pattern that the person or the individual is recognizing, like, okay, I'm noticing I'm really hard on myself with this, these particular situations trigger me and all those things, then we re-invite the breathing technique. One thing that I find really helpful is doing it in session with the person, because you've built that therapeutic relationship with the individual. So there is a foundation of trust. And I think that that's really important. So for those of you who may not have a therapist, it's really important to be really intentional about being in a space that you feel safe. So not necessarily just safe, like, oh, I'm in my home, but the 4 types of safety. So we're talking about physical safety, social safety, psychological safety, and moral safety. So in those particular circumstances, then those breathing techniques can really be helpful. When it does trigger individuals, it's most likely because they are being distracted and they're not being intentional about that moment. In their head, they may already be what we call outside of their window of tolerance. So they're in that moment of, I'm trying to escape this feeling. Grounding techniques will not be helpful in those situations. You need to be practicing grounding techniques when things are going well, because when things aren't going well, like I mentioned before about the breathing, you're in your threat system. Your brain is not going to think, oh yeah, this breathing right now is going to be helpful for me. The brain's saying, I'm in threat, I need to survive. So introducing these grounding techniques when you're triggered will probably not necessarily help as much. So it's about creating an intentional attitude towards a lifestyle. So perhaps starting, like, if you're feeling good today or the next day, reminding yourself, how about I do that breathing technique right now that things are going well? So the intention is you start building a habit. And when you build a habit, then it becomes second nature. So when it becomes second nature and you become triggered, it's already sort of on autopilot. So rather than jumping to what you used to do, you're also giving yourself permission to have an alternative. So I hope that that kind of answers. If not, and that's not necessarily what you mean, by any means, you can send me an email and I can try to explain further. Okay, so Megan knows personally, and perhaps others as well, tend to prioritize cognitive-based strategies over emotionally based ones out of bias towards analysis and criticism, or maybe discomfort with emotion. So is there an approach or entry point for people who shy away from emotionally based approaches like self-compassion that can help people who are more inclined to cognitive approaches? So that's a really good question. I know that at least in my practice, like we try to mix it together to give practical examples, but it's really about psychoeducation first. So individuals that may shy away either because they feel uncomfortable about it, or maybe they're more logical than emotions. And for them, it's sort of like, well, 2 + 2 = 4, but if it equals 6, it's invalid at that point. So I actually take a step before that, before incorporating different types of priority things like self-compassion and stuff, and really begin that conversation about better understanding what the purpose of emotions are and understanding clarifying what the biases are towards that. Most times it's because of core beliefs, right? It's because at one point we were all children and we all were taught by someone else, and those people have their own baggages and et cetera, right? So generationally. So for me, it's really using that I guess trauma-informed basis of clarifying and building that foundation to begin with, of understanding what is their definition of these particular things that we're going to be embarking on, what are the beliefs that are associated to it, and what might be the fears. So whether it's a fear of unknown, a fear of not having control, or fear of it just getting worse. So once we clarify that through education, then it makes it easier to really challenge and introduce the idea of cognitive-based strategies as well as emotionally based, which self-compassion is a little bit more that side. But in all aspects, there are ways of being able to explain emotionally driven strategies in very practical and unemotional ways, if that makes any sense. So I hope that answered your question, Megan. Again, if not, just if you can clarify, and then I'll do my best to kind of explain that further. So Miranda, you're saying that you don't see my email, so I'm going to type it right here to see if you see it now. So if I have any tools in your retraining, your thoughts, feelings, etc. So absolutely. That as well, if you can send me an email, I do have some tools that can be really helpful. I have one in particular that I actually give some of my clients their little wallet card size. And I find that those can be really helpful, especially when you're kind of out and about. So that particular one helps to retrain your thoughts. So it allows you to kind of put your attention elsewhere. So basically it's the 5 days, the 7 days in the week, and each day has a gratitude word and a color. So it's up to you if you want to make your own of different words that are really positive for you and colors. So as an example, just as a random thing, we're what today? We're Wednesday. Let's say Wednesday is green today. So the question you would ask yourself is, what am I feeling? So maybe I'm feeling anxious and I'm feeling distracted, right? So how do I want to feel? So maybe my Wednesday word is calm, right? So I want to feel calmness. So the next question would be, when was the last time that you felt calm? So that allows right then and there, from the very point that you're asking yourself, how am I feeling? You're already bringing your attention intentionally to the moment, right? Because a lot of times the things that make us distressed is because we're not aware that this is causing us anxiety until we are in that anxiety, right? So it becomes subconscious and then it goes into your consciousness. So this exercise allows you to bring your attention immediately. So that if you want to go more technical words, this is your 5 to 10% of your brain, right? We usually use 5 to 10%, and 90% is subconscious and unconscious. So when you ask yourself those questions, it becomes very intentional. Then you start retraining by changing your thought process into thinking about, when was the last time I felt calm? And then you start looking for green things. So what is the color today? So if it is green, you start looking, okay, well, there's a picture there, it's a green picture, and you start looking out for it. So already you're already intentionally starting to seek out another type of perspective. Other things as well is just to, it's called the 3 choice options. So how am I feeling? You're going through a variety of different questions. You know, what are the thoughts around that? Are they facts, opinions? Are they helpful? And then at the end, you have 3 choices. I usually tell people we always just have 3 choices. You can choose to accept it, to let it go, or to, accept it, let it go, or to change it. So those are the 3 options we have. So I do have a handout that gives you a visual of being able to go through those. So those are a few that I find that are really helpful for individuals in finding ways to retrain your thoughts. I have a whole other slew of them, but again, you can just reach out. I also want to promote to all of you, I had mentioned that at the beginning of my presentation, but we are partnered with the Canadian Mental Health Association in New Brunswick, and we've launched a clinical counseling clinic. This is something that we've always done in Moncton face-to-face, but with the pandemic, we've made it virtual. So for those of you that may be interested, you can follow CMHA New Brunswick on Facebook for that announcement. And on the Facebook page for that information. And it's free counseling. It is a 45-minute session, but from that session, we then have the opportunity to refer you to further therapy. So that would be through our community counseling program that we've also made available free to the public. And it is online, so either by telephone or by video. So I just wanted to do a shout out there since we have all of you listening today. So thank you. You said a great answer to whoever is anonymous. Thank you very much. Someone has said that they have an app that they're using while they're feeling well called Breath Ball. So that's pretty cool. I've not heard of that, but again, there are so many different apps out there that can be really helpful to be intentional about your work, to help with anxieties, and a whole variety of things. It's pretty incredible that in 2020, the different things that we are doing to adapt to building better mental health and mental wellness. So excellent. There's going to be upcoming webinars as well with CMHA New Brunswick, so please do keep checking out on that. I know that we just finished a moving from social isolation towards compassionate social distancing. So that is just a video to talk more specifically about those different things. So hopefully that is going to be helpful as well. It's more driven towards the pandemic that we're going through right now, but can also be helpful outside of that pandemic when we do come back to some kind of normal, because we know it's not going to be the same, but it will be something perhaps better. Yeah. So any other questions, all of you? It's fantastic. I'm really happy that all of you were able to be part of this webinar today. We have about 31 participants. We had about 35 starting. So excellent. So if there is nothing else, I'm just going to give a couple more minutes, but if not, I'm going to end the meeting. And as I mentioned to all of you, please do just stick around after I've ended the meeting, because there is a survey that can be really helpful for us to know what type of topics you guys are interested in hearing more about. And also just to let us know how we did and how we can improve on our presentation skills, let's say. Okay, so I'm going to just put my email once more in the chat, and I will say goodbye to everyone. I hope you have a compassionate day and be well. Take care, everyone. Bye.